Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Today, I will say something that may sound contradictory. The election for the president of the FIA is over, but our campaign is not, and neither is our mission to protect the integrity and reputation of the FIA. So how can an election be over when the ballot is more than 2 months away? This time, there will be no election. There will be no debate between ideas, no comparison of vision, no examination of leadership. There'll only be one candidate, the incumbent. And that's not democracy. That's the illusion of democracy. Throughout our FIAForward campaign, we've spoken of fairness, reform, and integrity, of returning the FIA to its members. But today, the outcome of this election and the flawed process that governs it proves how far we've drifted from that ideal. Under the FIA statutes, no presidential list can exist unless it includes one vice president for sport from every global region. And those vice presidents must be drawn from the list of those who've nominated themselves for the World Motorsport Council and have an international event on the FIA calendar. That sounds inclusive until you realize what happens when there are no independent candidates to choose from, no credible alternative options. In South America, only one person stood for the World Motorsport Council. In Africa, only two. All three are directly associated with the incumbent. The result is simple. No one but the incumbent can run under the FIA system. In the last election cycle, more than 40 candidates came forward for the World Motorsport Council. This time, 29. What changed? Did member clubs suddenly lose interest in shaping the sport? Or were they persuaded, pressured, or promised something not to stand? I can't say for sure, but when only 3 out of 12 eligible clubs across South America and Africa put themselves forward, independent of whether they support me or not, it's clear this is no longer a democratic process. When choice is replaced by control, democracy is diminished. Take South America. It's a continent that is passionate about motorsport, yet only one candidate emerged. Fabiana Eccleston has deep ties to Brazilian motorsport, and I respect her credentials. But as I traveled across the region, the same message came to me time and time again. Motorsport in Brazil is not typical of motorsport across South America. Yet no other club chose to nominate someone, which, by the way, would not have been a challenge to Mrs. Eccleston, but an opportunity to broaden representation of their region and strengthen the sport across the continent. Now consider Africa, a region of 22 clubs across 47 nations with vast promise and vast diversity. Yet only 2 candidates emerged, both declared supporters of the president. Amina Mohammed of Kenya is a respected and accomplished diplomat, but not a lifelong motorsport organizer. And Rodrigo Roja was permitted to run because of an esports event quietly added to the international sporting calendar last month by an e-vote, an event that, though it was scheduled for last weekend, to the best of our knowledge, appears never to have taken place. It's not even listed on his own club's calendar or their social media pages, which in fact is a situation that mirrors what happened the last time he stood as a candidate, an event put on the calendar but never run. So I ask, how is this how legitimacy should be built? Is this how African motorsports should be best represented? And is this how we're going to grow the sport in this critical region with so much untapped potential? When elections are decided before ballots are even cast, that's not democracy. That's theater. And when member clubs are left with no real choice, they become spectators, not participants. And this is not just my view. Just this week, and you have the sheets in your hands, the Utrecht School of Governance, an institution of global repute in sports integrity, released a study on the FIA using what they call the Sports Governance Observer Benchmark, or SGO. And the executive summary of this is aptly titled, "Power Without Brakes." So let me quote from the full report. The FIA's overall SGO index score is 45%, placing it among federations that have adopted the formal trappings of modern governance, but lack robust institutional policies and safeguards. The FIA's governance structurally concentrates power in the office of the president, and accountability remains confined within a system over which the president exercises decisive control. Regarding democracy, it continues, the presidential list system makes it difficult for challengers to stand for office. A closed list system and a nominations committee that acts as a powerful gatekeeping mechanism make leadership continuity almost guaranteed. And then there's this warning, entitled Existential Risk, and I quote again, "Unless independent oversight, open and competitive elections, transparent decision-making, and stakeholder representation are introduced, the FIA will remain structurally predisposed to the concentration of power, leaving leadership integrity and not institutional design as the organization's only line of defense against abuse." History, it says, history across international sports governance shows that reliance on such methods invariably fails. And those are not my words. They come from a world-leading academic authority on governance in sport, the same one that the IOC used to compare multiple federations. So, if the FIA continues down this path, it risks serious consequences. Many of the largest clubs already voice concerns, and major investors in motorsports who demand strong governance measures are openly critical. Revenues will flow out of the FIA and out of motorsport if investors cannot trust leadership looking after their large-scale financial commitments. The FIA's credibility is not a given. It must be earned through transparency, accountability, and integrity. 3 brief examples from my own experience. We strongly believe a series of ethics violations have been committed in this election process, and we have now submitted numerous ethics complaints. Assuming the Ethics Committee finds validity to our complaints, who does this go to for action? The President of the FIA or the Senate President, both conflicted parties. And the statutes don't provide any other method or any appeal. Where is the accountability? This is how institutions fail, and this is power without brakes. The Nominations Committee is, by statute, supposed to be transparent. Yet they have published no minutes, published no meetings, and refused to release the list of people who submitted their names for World Motorsport Council, only a list of those they allegedly approved. In fact, there is no publicly available evidence that this committee even met. And if it did the representative from Mozambique recuse himself when they approved Mr. Roja from Mozambique? How would we know? There is absolutely no transparency. And this is how institutions fail. This is power without brakes. Or speaking of the Nominations Committee, did they consider that Mr. Cohen of Costa Rica has no publicly listed events on the international sporting calendar? No international events listed on his own club's website? Or was he exceptionally approved by the Senate, a process that is only open to the incumbent president? We don't know. There's no evidence. Yet he was approved for the World Motorsport Council list. So this then is the brand of the FIA, and this is what partners and clubs are beginning to realize. When you have power without brakes, institutions fail. So for us, the real campaign continues. For every club that still believes in fairness and integrity, for every sport and mobility club that seeks equal access to information, funding, and opportunity, for every participant who believes that the FIA should support them, not compete against them. Across our travels, many member clubs have told me, we want to speak, but we can't. Clubs fear losing projects, funding, or recognition if they simply question the system. And that's why this campaign must persist, not for power, but for principle. We'll continue to be a voice for the silenced, and we will not rest until every member club feels free to speak for itself. We'll continue to champion both pillars of the FIA, sport and mobility. On the mobility side, we'll advocate for policies that help clubs worldwide grow their businesses and support emerging clubs to become sustainable enterprises, not dependent institutions. Because strong mobility clubs make for vibrant communities and lend strength to the FIA's mission. On the sports side, our advocacy remains anchored in 3 words: cost, complexity, and culture. We must dramatically reduce costs for competitors and organizers with real, implementable ideas. We must simplify complexity of regulations that now act as barriers to entry, especially for grassroots events. And above all, we must change the culture so that the FIA becomes not the tip of a pyramid, but a service that member clubs deserve. As regulators, we must remember that our role is not to control, but to serve, to be far-sighted partners to the mobility and motorsports communities, helping plan well into the future and not disrupting those trying to build the future. The FIA should be the partner of choice, the halo brand for promoters, investors, and governments that want to stand next to us, that every club wants to have on their website, and that every club president wants to be associated with. Over past months, traveling around the world, I've been supported, engaged, and advised by many clubs, organizations, and individuals. And to all those who supported and continue to support this journey, thank you. And I still have faith in the clubs, in the volunteers, in the people across motorsports and mobility who know that integrity matters. So while the rules of this election mean that there will be no election, our cause continues. Because real leadership isn't just about who holds office, it's about who holds faith. As challenging as the last few months have been for our campaign, and as hard as the situation is now, I feel proud that we've acted with integrity throughout. So yes, the ballot box may be closed, and the members' voices are silenced, for now. But we'll keep driving the FIA forward until democracy, service, and partnership are not just an illusion, but the living values that define our federation every day. Thank you. We have, I believe at the back, a microphone, and as those of you who are in Silverstone know, I'm not allergic to questions. Ask me the hardest ones you have. Christian.
Tim described the state of the FIA in your view. How do you think the FIA became what do you think it is now?
This is not an overnight process. This is one that's happened over 2 decades. I would say that Mohammed is not the first person to have thought of ways to restrict the ballot, but we have gotten to a point now where we have basically ensured that there's only one person who can go on the ballot. Consider this: 245 member clubs in the FIA, and yet there's only 6 in South America that were involved in the situation with World Motorsport Council. 6 clubs determined the election for 245. So this isn't new. What is new is the shrinking of the World Motorsport Council pool. What is new is what has led to that. And what is new is the fact that we have no options. Last time out, there were at least options for 2 candidates.
How is it possible to gain more candidates in South America if this continent is the key for the next election? What can you do?
The simple answer is to unrestrict it from countries that have international motorsport events. That would open it up to every country in South America, every country around the world. If they want to put themselves up, let the members decide who the best representatives for the World Motorsport Council are. I would argue that there are countries that are doing great work on grassroots motorsports, that are doing great work on grassroots rallying, or are doing great work on open wheel or cross car or whatever, but don't have an international motorsport event. You know, people that have huge experience in organizing events, but are restricted from being on the World Motorsport Council. So I think if we really want the World Motorsport Council to represent the members across the world, it can't be that there's only 6 countries in South America that are eligible to run, a couple of whose presidents are beyond the age limit. So, you know, I think there's an easy fix to this, opening it up, because the World Motorsport Council should be the elected representatives of the members, not just those put in place by the president.
Is there any process ongoing, either using the FIA's internal bodies or perhaps an external body, that could lead to the ballot being reopened?
So I know that other candidates are looking at legal processes. I've certainly spoken to Laura Villars this week, in fact. We are choosing to go through the FIA's internal processes, which is starting with the Ethics Commission. I am not a revolutionary. You only need to look at me to realize that. I am not a revolutionary. I do want to evolve the FIA to a better place. And so I intend to use the internal processes of the FIA, as much as I don't believe that they're independent, as much as I don't believe that that process right now is free and open, but I intend to use that process at least to start. Just behind you. I'll come to you in just a second.
Hi, Tim. Governance can be quite difficult for a normal fan to actually understand. So are you able to explain just what the impact this has on a sport like Formula One if it doesn't have a democratic governing body?
That's a great question. I think it's very difficult for the average fan to understand the internal process of the FIA. The FIA is first and foremost set up to represent its members, to develop motorsport around the world, to develop mobility around the world. And that's quite difficult for the average fan of, say, Formula One to understand. But I think what you need to think of is that the FIA provides a foundation on which promoters, clubs, or anybody can build their own house. So we provide a foundation which is where Formula One can build its house, and obviously right now is doing it reasonably successfully. Without democratic governance, without a strong internal process, that foundation is built on sand. And so it's very easy for instance, a president of the FIA under this system to walk in and say, let's just throw out the agreement that says we're going to have a 4-year stable engine and decide we're going to do something different. You know, for investors, that's incredibly difficult to see, that kind of instability. So, and by the way, partners, people who have governance agreements within their own companies, which is 99.9% of the companies in, say, the Formula One paddock, they have a requirement for this. So they find an undemocratic FIA to be a threat. So I don't know that that still reaches to the average fan, but at the end of the day, what I would describe is a house built on sand is pretty unstable. Sorry, just up here.
Sorry to elbow the microphone in the face. Tim, what sort of practical steps can you take to stay on the agenda? Because you're sort of on the outside of the tent at the moment. So how can you stay in the headlines and advance your agenda?
Well, this has never been about headlines. This has been about the members. So I have been contacted by any number of clubs over the last week as this sort of news has been coming out that go, oh wow, I didn't realize, I didn't understand. So our job now is to help educate the members so that when they go to these general assemblies, they realize, oh wait, our vote has a consequence. You know, changing the statutes however the president wants has a consequence. And the consequence now is that we don't have an election system, right? So we've got to claw that back, and that's only going to be through education of the members. So we have a newsletter system that goes out to all of the members, has been over the last couple of months. It'll continue to go out. We'll continue to educate. This has become our mission now, is education. Just behind you.
So this process, what has the experience been like in terms of, has it been heartening, has it been negative or positive? Because obviously Carlos Sainz seen it, he considered a run and opted against it. And I think from the beginning there was maybe a degree of skepticism from some quarters about how this process may end. So are you surprised by how this is all unfolded?
Disappointed, yes. Surprised, probably not. Again, I think it's incredibly valuable for somebody to stand up and run. Because I think if you don't hold up a mirror to the system, then the system will just continue to as it is, without anybody realizing, hey, here's somebody who, in my humble opinion, is reasonably credible and who has run and gone around the world, you know, and met with us and explained good ideas. And yet we still don't get an opportunity to vote on those ideas. You know, that's what I think has been valuable about that. And I actually feel good about that. You know, in a 12-day period, I did something like 200,000 miles, crisscrossing the world. A little hard on the body, I can tell you. And so I've had my up moments and my down moments. But the up moments are meeting with a club who said, listen, we support Mohammed, but we'd like to listen to you. That's actually been a very heartening process. You know, that people actually want to listen to ideas. And at the end they said, okay, we got to think about that. You know, most of them have said to me, yeah, actually, come December, we'd like to make our own minds up. Now, there are many, many clubs that have also said, yeah, but we feel threatened. We feel like our funding might go away. We feel like, you know, I've not named any names in this process, and I've stood looking rather lonely throughout to those of you who've seen me in the paddock and so on, more or less on my own. I have a marvelous team of people behind me who've been helping me along this. This is not possible to do what I've done on your own. So we've had ups, we've had downs. The ups, as I said, is that meeting with that club in a small country in Africa, in South America, or wherever, or in Asia, and having that dialogue with them that educates them that there is another way.
Two questions. First one, obviously, when you embarked on this process, you would have been fully aware of the requirements to get your team together and the South America situation in particular.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your plan to try and get a South American person on board? And secondly, is today effectively the start of a 4-year campaign for you to run again, or try and run again in 2029, and over that 4-year period, A, chip away at member clubs to try and get them on your side and appreciate all the points you are now making right here, and B, also to chip away at the FIA regulations and statutes to try and get them changed over that period of time, because this is not going to be the work of the moment to get those rules and regulations.
Well, as to whether I'm running in 4 years' time, you have to ask my wife that question, and probably in a couple of years' time when we've decompressed from where we are now. You know, again, my vision and my goal at the moment is to help educate the members. What that process is and how long that's going to take and whether we can sustain it for 4 years, to be determined. To answer your first question, yes, we absolutely were aware of the system. And, you know, I think what the answer you're going to get if you ask the FIA about the system is it's a democratic process. It was known to the people who came in. They understood the system, and I get that. But again, I would point out 6 clubs in South America determined the whole thing for 245 clubs. Now, did I understand that going in? Absolutely. Have I visited all 6 clubs? Have I gone there as well? Yes. And am I aware that Mohammed and his people have been there too? Yes. In that race, I would say he beat me.
A slight expansion on that. Do you feel that promises were given to you or that you were let down, or that maybe you were led to believe that you might have support that didn't materialise? I mean, we've seen this in IOC votes, for example, for the Olympic Games, where people go into the system thinking they've got votes in the bag and then they just suddenly disappear. People don't actually.
No, I didn't go into this. I didn't go into the system naively or believing that there were votes there that weren't there. You know, the naive part of this is going to a nation in Africa who I won't mention, but going there and saying, you know, unless you exercise power, you're not going to win this vote. Okay. For me, this was a vote on good ideas, so maybe in that regard, I was naive. But, you know, that's been the quote to me from several, has been, yeah, we love everything about you, but you're not exercising that power. And for me, that's been about integrity. You know, I can't promise somebody a 20 or 30,000 euro grant. It's not mine to promise right now. I think there are excellent reasons for many of them to get grants, you know, or I can't threaten to take away a grant. But I've heard from clubs who've told me that. Whether it's true or not, I can't tell you. But, you know, I have not been able to exercise that power of the incumbency, and that's maybe the naivete of going into this process. I think there was a question over here. We'll just pop back. No? Okay.
Can you just clarify when it comes to potential candidates in South America and Africa who would have gone onto your presidential list? Were names put forward? Did they formally apply? Do you understand why they weren't accepted? And were there candidates who were going to apply but for whatever reason didn't?
Here's where the complete, is untransparency a word? Or I'm going to coin it. Lack of transparency of the nominations committee really is a problem. Because we don't know who put themselves forward. We know who we think put themselves forward. We've talked to them, you know, but we don't know. I know of at least one who told me he was going to put his name forward and ended up not. I also know of at least one who said they were going to put their name forward but were offered something else. So, you know, unfortunately, this lack of transparency means that nobody, other than the incumbent, knows who did what.
How is there ever going to be change inside the FIA if you have these issues that you're talking about and suggestions that you're stating that the clubs feel threatened or basically not bullied in many respects if they don't support the incumbent, you know, a particular grant will be taken away? Surely there's never going to be change if that's the process that's being displayed inside the FIA at the moment.
I think, you know, I actually have faith in the members that when they become educated at some point, there is a process by which the members can put forward statute changes. There is a process by which that election can happen. So I think we need to get that groundswell going. Maybe I'm naive to think that we can get that going, but I actually think there will come a moment where the members actually realize they have been disenfranchised. And I think this process is going to help them. I think there is a moment at which they're going to say, I don't like what's going on. I would invite you to go use the QR code on this paper that we've given you to go look at this report on the governance of the FIA by an independent group. We were involved in initiating this, but once we said, could you look at this? We weren't, it was a closed box to us. So this report that they've put out is pretty damning, and this is now going to all of the members of the FIA. This is proof by the same metric that the IOC uses that we are not a well-governed federation.
So what's the reaction been in the Formula One paddock? I guess you've spoken to probably figures over the past couple of weeks as this process has been unfolding, but what is the reaction to this?
I think the reaction generally, and I won't be specific to the Formula One paddock, the reaction generally has been disappointment that we're not getting to have an election in December. I think it is shocking to everybody to realize that we can actually literally pull the plug on an election before there's an election. There will be a formal vote. It'll be a democratic vote for one candidate. But I think that's shocked a lot of people. So I've received that feedback, not just from the Formula One paddock, but also from people in the clubs who've gone like, whoa, wait, I didn't understand that. It's really been shocking to people. Right behind you.
Formula One is a US-owned sport. We saw with FIFA what happens when the United States government gets involved in the governance of sport and takes a close look at it. Do you think that there's a fitting situation here for maybe the US government to take a close look at Formula One's governance?
Well, I think there is scope for governments to take a look. The FIA is a French-led federation, and within French law, there is an idea that you should follow your own rules. And Article 1.3 of the FIA statutes specifically says that it should be a democratic organization. So we've strayed from that. So I would say the starting point for me would be for the French authorities to look into that failure in governance, that failure in democracy that is enshrined in the FIA statutes. The US government, I can't speak for them as much as I hold a US passport, but I think when you look at FIFA, you're talking about actual criminal behavior. So, I think that would need to be the trigger for an investigation from the Department of Justice. James, did you have your hand up? Nope. One more over here. I did promise that I would get you guys back to the track in reasonable time. I understand there's a big press conference at 11 going on as well.
Had you been able to fill the presidential list and proceed onto the ballot, based on the conversations you had, would you have won?
I would have had a very good chance. Throughout, I felt that when I went to people, explained the ideas, explained the position, and then said, you have an opportunity to cast your independent ballot in December, the look in people's eyes was like, okay, yeah, I do. That was the opportunity, which, by the way, is why it suits to stop it at this point, right? Is because then there is a risk against the incumbent. Christian.
Did you have any contact with Mohammed during the whole process?
No, I've had a lot of contact with the legal department of the FIA. We've received any number of rather vague responses from the legal department, which is part of why we're going through an ethics complaints now. But I have not received any contact from Mohammed himself. We shook hands in Silverstone. No more questions? Well, thank you everybody for being here. Sorry that we don't have better news, but I think it's important news, and I look forward to, I'll be around. I think most of you have my contact information. Please feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you, everybody.